Is gold back? It's playing peekaboo with the dollar. Solid week for gold. We'll talk about Bitcoin. Hit 60,000 at 58,000. We'll talk about it. Everything's still awesome for the most part in the markets. Copper still rocking and rolling at 408. We're going to get into Coinbase, Reddit going public, Volkswagen. We'll talk the Atlanta shootings. We'll talk Biden staffers being suspended for, oh no, Nick, they smoked marijuana once upon a time. Naughty, naughty.
They're going to kill their children.
They're going to kill their children. We're going to talk about the uranium squeeze that is in full force. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with my co-host, the witty, the intelligent, the world famous Mr. Nick Hodge. This is episode 109 of Bizarro World. It's a crazy time out there, Mr. Hodge. How are you?
I'm feeling so much better with no belt sander above my head. And kudos to Tim, who does the audio on this, because he cleaned it up quite nicely last week. So much better week. We'll talk about the markets. I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I am excellent. Thank you very much for asking. Let's get right into the markets. Gold had itself an interesting week. We said last Friday that the trading action was interesting because it actually ended up higher on the day with the dollar and real rates still rising. And so here we have the 10-year still at 173 today, but gold managed to actually close at 1743. It looked for a bit there like it could possibly dip back below the $1,700 level and stay. It turned around beautifully to close the week out. Silver, same thing, closed at 26.19 after looking like possibly it was headed back, to the low 25s. So thoughts on that, Nick? I know you've been watching it all week. We've been watching it as we usually do. I know we chatted off air a bit earlier in the week, but what are you thinking?
I think it's still transitory, right? I think that we've got really no firm direction. It still wants to consolidate around that 1700 mark. Good to see it move up. I think these are good signs for gold, right? That it wanted to perk up after it hit that support there, that it's going up, like you say, with rates. Those are all good things. But the market, broader macro market, I think is still trying to make up its mind. We had the sell-off, what was that, 3 weeks ago now, 2.5 weeks ago. And we said that was sort of, what did I call it? A chink in the armor. The bull had been wounded, but was still running, I think I wrote. And so you mentioned copper still doing good, and everyone knows that's the doctor. The VIX still says that the stock market's okay, but it doesn't have I'm talking about stocks now, S&P. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have the conviction of that bull market that we've seen, like in the first 2 months of the year, right? It's not, it's having lower point days up. It's happening on lower volume. And I don't think it's quite made up its mind yet. And I also think that it's a holiday, right? We're coming up here on spring break. Schools are going to be closed if they're open from April 5th to whatever it's going to be. And so the typically lighter volume there. So I think that anyway, and like I was writing, a lot of hemming and hawing. No one knows what's going on, Gerardo. What was I saying yesterday? The meltdown's coming, but not yet. It's still a melt up until the meltdown starts. And so everyone, I think, is a little confused, but can sense that a turn is coming. And if I had to bet, I would bet that turn means higher for gold after the consolidation we've seen since record highs last August.
I agree 100%. I don't think we have decisive price action yet, but I will say this, within the context of, $1,750, $1,800 gold, we have a good week next week. There's several companies that you and I both follow that we're excited to see results from. Chicana Copper is one. They're due for a news release. I've been told that New Placer Dome Gold and Nevada Sunrise Gold finally will have some numbers out of Kinsley Mountain. Anybody that's followed me for a while knows how much I like that project and the potential there, not only for an expansion of the current resource, but for new discovery. So I think those stocks, if they deliver with the drill bit, will have themselves a good week. We saw, we talked about copper being at 408 this week. Well, man, Hannon had itself a week, right? It hit a high of 61 cents today, closing strong on good volume. little by little, the resource space is starting to turn. You, Mr. Hodge, have gone on a phenomenal run, not just recently, a multi-year run, but you're starting to see a lot of your non-resource related plays really pay off. You want to talk about some of those? You want to talk about Resas a bit and a couple of the other successes that subscribers have been able to enjoy?
Oh, well, I guess if you're asking me, I mean, we financed a lot of companies over the year, resource and not resource, some cannabis, a tiny bit of crypto, and then, little oddball things here and there, little niche tech plays. I had like an electronic ink play called Invisible. That's actually doing quite well. Those shares are up around $1.30, $1.40 now. I haven't looked at them today, but I can pull that up. And that's one that we were financing around 30 cents. Yeah, it closed at $1.40 today. So we financed that at 30 cents a couple of years ago. We had 60-cent warrants in that. I've been joking with people lately that finally getting to exercise warrants. It's despite the success in the capital markets, the warrants have been hard to come by because they're priced strategically, and unless they're extended, which is sort of a lazy man's way out, they oftentimes fall off. But anyway, like you say, the market's improving, so we're starting to exercise warrants. So Invisible Interactive, like I say, 30 cents to it actually went over $2 earlier this year, and we had warrants in that at 60 cents. So that's good work if you can get it. Visibility is a company that I helped finance privately, down around 25 cents. That's now $1 stock. I talked a little bit about Modelo Rama deal that they signed on this podcast a couple of months ago. And update on that is those are now being actually deployed. They're going through with that. And so AB InBev is starting with 50,000 stores. Those things are going in, was announced, I guess that was last week.
Let's see if they stay in. Let's see if they stay in. It'll be interesting.
That's pretty good work. That stock's now at 80 cents. And then Resas, you were talking about this sort of, what do they call this sector? Prop tech, property technology, like real estate, fintech or whatever. It's like a Facebook for real estate agents is what I call it. But then they try to monetize those agents by offering a platform where they can share leads and settle commissions and sell houses off market, which is the way a lot of houses are sold now through realtors and their networks, because it's such a hot market. And so anyway, long story short, we financed that at 20 cents a couple of years ago. And that was actually quite a deal to be able to get on that financing, because a lot of the money had been raised previously at much higher prices, well north of $1, and some people paying, I think, as high as $4 a share. So it's been plodding along. It's done some decent deals, and sorry, I'm giving you a long answer, but it was able to buy a bunch of FDA approved tests for COVID last year, and was selling the tests, and they were actually able to achieve profitability on that. And then they announced a big deal with Keller Williams, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, realtor networks in the world. And Keller Williams is recommending that their real estate agents pay to join Resas's platform, and the premium platform is $99 a month. So that math gets really squirrely really quickly. And then the last sort of what set it up to over $1 was this gentleman from a company called EXP World Holdings joined the board. And so EXP is another prop tech company. They call themselves a cloud-based brokerage. And so their vice chairman decided to join the board of Resas. And that's a pretty big deal, because EXP shares went from below $1 to $90. And so like tens of 1,000% return. And this gentleman only joins the boards of 3 companies at a time, and has a pretty serious plan for U.S. capital markets, et cetera. And so when people of that caliber, he's like former bigwig at Cantor Fitzgerald and has held a ton of roles. His name is Randall Miles. Anyway, as soon as that news came out, shares went from, they've been slowly creeping up to 80, 85, 90 cents. They went to $1.50 very quickly and have pulled back a little bit. But anyway, those are three non-resource deals that we've definitely had big success with for sure. And we also had 20-cent warrants in that. So a rarity to get 20-cent shares with 20-cent warrants. But it's all about the people and the connections you have, right?
It's all about the people and the connections. It's absolutely a relationship business. A little common sense also helps. And speaking of common sense, we have to talk uranium squeeze for all the hashtag silver squeeze stuff that lasted a whole day. There's been a squeeze in the uranium space, and you know what? The juniors are responding beautifully, right? You have Fission at 60 cents. You have Sky Harbor today up 13%, closing at 45 cents. You had UEC this week hit a 52-week high of 367. And so, look, the equities, these are names that traded at, a third of what they're trading at today. And so a large part of that is being influenced by the fact that a lot of these companies, Denison raised 75 million, UEC raised some money, and they're doing it to buy and establish a physical inventory of uranium. They're going to sit on the pounds. They're going to buy them cheap. They're going to wait for them to go higher because supply and demand fundamentals say it will. And then they're going to sell it into the market, which I think is, again, it's common sense, but it's brilliant in its simplicity, right? It's forcing the hands of the utilities that have yet to step off the sidelines. And, we both understand that them paying $60 or $100 or $30 a pound for uranium is very inconsequential to the bottom line for the utilities. But it makes a big difference for the companies that are sitting on some of it. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on the move to start stacking uranium pounds at the company level.
I mean, I think that it's a pretty brilliant strategy because everyone, and I include myself and everyone, had come to the realization that this bull market, which is when, not an if, the when wasn't going to come until the utilities got off the sidelines. And they're seemingly content to stay on the sidelines probably until next year as they work through secondary supplies and stockpiles and upfueling or upcycling, et cetera, right? So, and we know the strategy has been good from an investment perspective. If you just go back to the last bull market and look at like Uranium Participation Corp, for example. And then over the past couple of months, and we've talked about this on the podcast, we've seen the equities start to move. And in fact, started to say that, at least I wrote this once, that they might be getting a bit ahead of themselves, given that the spot price hadn't yet moved. And in fact, the spot price in the past couple of months started to go the wrong direction, right? It was up around 30, started to go back down to 29 to 28. I don't know exactly how low it got off the top of my head, but what you've seen, and you don't need me to tell you that the strategy is a good one. If you can just look at the spot price going back up closer to $30 a pound this week since these deals were announced. I can't tell you what the utilities are going to do, of course, but we know that the market has liked the yellow cake story, and those were the sort of like the new Uranium Participation Corp. We knew that the market liked the URC, the Uranium Royalty Corp story, which had let's call it a tangential relationship to the physical uranium story with its own relationship with yellow cake. And then, as you say, UEC this week announcing that they're gonna, and Denison, raising money and buying pounds to store is a good strategy. So, I mean, you said it pretty well. I don't know when the utilities are gonna get off the sideline, but the market appreciates this strategy. And I also think that uranium has done well as a sector to position itself more as a clean metal of late. And I think that is also going to be important here going forward.
Let's talk clean metals. Volkswagen decided to pull the plug on its South Korean battery maker deal that it had, a big deal in the critical metal space. And so it basically told, I'm talking about Volkswagen now, it's South Korean battery suppliers, that their current technology would be excluded for the most part from future production. And if you if you're keeping track, everybody's announcing aggressive plans to expand the electric vehicle fleet. Volkswagen, no exception. But even these battery suppliers said it came as a shock that, Volkswagen has kind of decided that they're going to go at this with a different battery technology. And so I know that you wanted to chat a bit about that. I'd love to hear your take on it. I have a company that I believe will benefit tremendously from this news, and I'll share that here a bit later on in one of my favorite critical metals juniors. But
they have a deal with Northvolt by chance?
Check. Yes. But yeah, look, the bottom line is this isn't slowing down. This is a trend that if you play it right with real companies that are actually doing real work, you're going to do very, very, very well. And interesting week in the space. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Mr. Hodge.
Well, the take is this: I fucking told you so. It's not hard. It's not easy to make batteries, is it?
Common sense again, right? Not so common.
Everyone loved the Tesla and still loves the Tesla. And I'm not going to knock Tesla at all. I think it's phenomenal. It's good for investing. It's good for batteries. It's good for EV adoption. But as we've seen with Tesla itself, and I can, going back, 4 or 5 years here, where Elon Musk was talking a big game about sourcing his lithium from North America. And I was sitting there saying, nope, that's not going to happen, right? And then sure enough, he's got to source it somewhere else. And these are things we've talked about in this podcast. And then we talk about other things like how people are going to eventually want to see the entire life cycle of the car, right? Like on the sticker on the window. Now you have, MPG statistics and all the trim packages, et cetera. But soon it's going to be like, what type of battery is this? Like you were just saying, is it a prismatic cell or is it a pouch cell? Was the cobalt mine in the DRC, or did the cobalt come from Canada or Idaho, right? And so that's all going to be on there, like life cycle chain. And you're starting to see the building blocks of that put in place and the reasons that is going to be the way of the future. And that's when you say the common sense plays are the companies that have access to the future supply in stable jurisdictions, right? And so a couple of months ago, we talked about when the U.S. had to cancel the deal with the same company that Volkswagen just told to go pound sand, right? The South Korean battery manufacturer. And that's one of the reasons that Volkswagen did this week, is they had a bad taste in their mouth from them not being able to get their batteries, because it was Ford and Volkswagen plants in the US that were affected by that, if you remember that story. And so here you have Volkswagen saying, look, we're not going to use these pouch cells from South Korea. We're going to do prismatic cells, and we're going to start building our own gigafactories here in Europe. And that's just the way that this thing is going to evolve, right? If you love Tesla, you're going to love the company that you'll talk about later, and these other companies that have access to traceable sources of lithium and cobalt and nickel and manganese, and the things that we've said a million times now. But the rest of the world is now starting to catch up to that reality that you can't just say, oh, we're going to manufacture all cars electric by 2030. Well, that's great, but where are you going to get the raw materials from? And so
the simple questions, right?
Here we go.
Yeah, I know, the simple question: where are you going to get it from? I mean, it really comes down to that. And so, again, if you can find companies that are involved, that are actually doing real work, there's a way to monetize this. I think it's why the future for copper seems so bright, and copper gold plays are going to be exceedingly in demand. And so, I'll give you a freebie. Leading Edge Materials is in the midst of finalizing economic studies on its Woxna graphite project in Sweden, and simultaneously also doing a study on the Norra Kärr heavy rare earth deposit, also in Sweden. Both of these projects are quality projects that should be able to be either joint ventured with a bigger player, or brought to development. One of the largest shareholders, and there's a couple of billionaires that are large shareholders, but Mr. Kraft, the largest shareholder, he didn't get behind this a year and a half or two ago just to see it be a 35-40 cent company, or a company with $40-50 million market cap. This is something of regional pride for him, is how I've understood the project. It's a passion project for him. It's something that he feels can contribute to mining in Sweden and the critical metal space. And so, look, I think Leading Edge Materials is one of the few companies that, though it's up in the past few months, has not taken off the way some of its peers have. And I think it's a heck of an opportunity if you like lithium, if you like rare earths, if you like graphite, and specifically the battery grade stuff that they're looking to produce. So there you go. Free podcast, free tidbit. Go do your own due diligence. You'll get your money's worth. I guarantee it.
Love it. We've been talking about Leading Edge for a while, and I mentioned Northvolt because I know Leading Edge was working with Northvolt, and that's one of the companies that Volkswagen will be working with to build its battery gigafactories, right? And so that's what I mean by that supply chain, right? So maybe in 2030, once Volkswagen sorts out its battery supply chain issues, and you're buying a nice new all-electric, what's it going to be? Let's say you're buying a Tiguan. On the window there might say graphite and or lithium cleanly sourced from Sweden, right? And that's what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Did you see the little spat between Joe Biden and Vladimir?
Well, no. I saw some right-wing things calling Biden a cuck, but you know how that goes.
That's always an interesting insult to me. Like, do you think the people that do that have been caught on the wrong side of that one and just had an unpleasant experience, and they're like, you cuck?
I don't know. Liberty University made the basketball tournament.
Thank God. Anyhow,
I bet they did.
So in a Tuesday interview with ABC, President Biden said, "I do," in response to a question which asked him if he thought the Russian president was a killer. And so Vladimir decided to retort by saying, "It takes one to know one." What I did like, jokes aside, and I've talked about this before when Mr. Trump was our president, I never liked the fact that Russia went, at least in the public space, unpunished for the hits that were put on our troops. That has never sat well with me. If there was retribution, behind the scenes, it wasn't publicized, and there just wasn't anything of a push publicly to get payback, and so I do like Biden's stance. I do hope that there is some action that's followed by the statements, and it's not just that. If you believe the media, if you believe the CIA reports, Russia also interfered with the election, and so a lot there. It'll be interesting to see how that relationship continues on. And it'll be interesting to see Biden's approach to China. I was complimentary of Mr. Trump in his direct approach with China, because I think for decades on end, they've been eating our lunch when it comes to IP, right? As it relates to technology. And the bottom line is, with their rare earth dominance, they were reverse engineering everything that was being produced out there and keeping it for themselves and monetizing it, right? And basically counterfeiting all of the technology that they wanted to. And so I think this is why you're seeing such a rush to establish these independent domestic critical metals supply chains, because finally it started to click back to the common sense theme in these politicians' brains that this isn't sustainable, especially at a time where China is looking to increase its dominance in every aspect of our global society, whether it's economically, whether it's, development, infrastructure, you name it. There's something to deal with. And so hopefully the approach is a prudent one. We'll see. Thoughts there, Nick?
Just that China is a much more serious threat than Russia or North Korea, which was also in the news this week. And I think that's, I don't even know where I saw him get called limp-wristed or a cuck or whatever. It was the trifecta, though. It was China, I guess North Korea wouldn't take the call, and whatever happened with Putin. And really, I don't care about the Russia. I mean, as a threat to economic prowess for the U.S., and clearly militaristically, what they've done is horrible. But when I see things in the news about Russia or North Korea, I don't pay them as much mind as I do China, because I view China as a much more serious threat for this new century when it comes to everything that you just said. I mean, the size of their population, the ferocity with which they're ascending technologically and with their military technology, etc. And so anyway, that's not really an answer, but the China stuff is much more serious, I think, than Russia or North Korea. And that's just how I frame it for myself. Agreed.
Very consequential and definitely something to watch. Sad week. It's, that slowly but surely things are opening back up again, because we're starting to hear about mass shootings again, right? There was actually one a week and a half ago that I meant to talk about. And frankly, I was a bit beat up about it. It's just, it had been a bit since we had a mass shooting in the public domain. And that one a week and a half ago, I didn't bring it up because I didn't want to bring a sour note to the podcast. But what happened in Atlanta this week? I think I think we have to talk about it, right? 8 victims were shot at 3 massage parlors in Georgia. Mostly women of Asian descent. And so, the way it was handled, we've talked about the 2 tiers of justice in this country. The way it was handled, I think, was really indicative of how law enforcement is selective in its approach to arresting suspects. They arrested this young man without a fight, without a shot being fired. He wasn't beat up. I'm not saying he should have. I'm saying it's clear to me that the police are able and capable of making arrests without necessarily having to kill someone or shoot them every single time. In this case, Robert Aaron Long is the shooter, 21 years old. He tried justifying the shooting, saying he had a sex addiction, which didn't make much sense to me. The Georgia sheriff downplayed, in my opinion, the severity of the atrocity that this young man committed by saying it's clear that Mr. Long had a bad day. And I was like, what the fuck? He said it's clear Mr. Long had a bad day, and unfortunately this is what happened, is what he said.
Jesus. Dude, I don't know the particulars at all. I clearly know that it happened. I don't know how premeditated it was. I haven't heard anything about a motive or anything like that. And so I'm not going to talk about it a lot, but do you have any color to offer on that?
Yeah, he frequented Atlanta spas. They know that the day before he had been kicked out of his parents' house, he went to a gun store. He legally purchased a weapon, a handgun, and apparently went into 3 separate spas, 2 of which they have confirmed he had frequented in the past. And just walked in and started shooting. And so, they're trying to get to the bottom of a motive. They don't know, obviously it appears to be racially motivated. 6 of the 8 people that were killed were women of Asian descent. The other 2 happen to be there. And so, just tough stuff, man. Yeah. A lot to digest there. There was an attack on a grandmother, an elderly Asian grandmother, a few days after in San Francisco by, what appeared to be a man in his late 40s, early 50s. This grandmother, is in such fear of being attacked just because she's Asian that she had started to carry a bat around her. And so I don't know if you saw that story, but she basically got beat up, but was able to fight back with her bat and basically whoop this guy's ass, until the medics and the cops showed up. But, if you see the video, it's just hard to watch. She's got this big, huge black eye and this knot on her head. And I just can't see how any man could go up to any woman, let alone an elderly grandmother, and think that that's okay, or that is an adequate response to anything. And so, I don't know. I don't really have words. Be kind to each other, people. If you need help for whatever, whether it's a sex addiction, your racism, you still believe Trump should be in office, you believe Biden's the devil, whatever it is, man, just reach out to somebody. And we got to do a better job as a society in dealing with mental health issues in this country. And, I'm not taking the accountability away from this guy that went and took, 8 innocent people's lives. I'm just saying that as a society, we have to do a better job. We have to do a better job of looking out for each other, because it's hard for me to believe that a lot of this stuff isn't avoidable. I mean, it just doesn't happen with the prevalence that it happens here in the US. And it's not just because of guns, right? Yeah. Thoughts, Nick?
No, not a lot of thoughts. A lot of mental health in this country, a lot of folks on medication for it. Unfortunately, it's been stigmatized in a way that leads to not enough people seeking treatment, or people not seeking treatment early enough. A lot of guns in this country. I was at a sportsman's store last weekend that sold guns, and they had a wall of pistols. There's probably, I don't know if I had to guess, 30, 40, 50 pistols on the wall. And my buddy was looking at fishing gear, so I was just shooting the shit with the salesman. And he said that in the past 12 months, they sold they sold as many guns in the past 12 months as they sold in the past 4 years. And that wall of pistols that had 40 or 50 on it, they started the year 2021 with 3 months ago with over 300 on the wall. And so a lot of guns being sold. That's one store here in Spokane. So a lot of guns out there. And, I'm a Second Amendment advocate. And so
as am I. Yeah.
I hadn't read a lot about this case. For some reason, I want to start talking about incels, because it seems to me, if I had to guess, and I use my gut, which would probably be stupid, but I'm going to do it anyway. It was more about sex and intimacy than about race, if I had to guess. But anyway, that's just me being dumb.
No, I think there's likely to be something to that. We've seen it, in the past. Yeah, no room for that. No room for any of that. Anyhow, let's switch gears a bit. The Biden one.
And sorry, I guess there was one more comment I would have added there, and I don't know why it's coming back to me now, but is that you say it's a sign that things are opening back up, but I think that, there's a compounding effect on the mental health that we've yet to see the full effect of from the virus and the world being in a pandemic and just all of that, right? And so we'll see what the effects of that are. We already know about the increase in domestic violence, et cetera. And we're starting to see some of we know people are now more anxious and more stressed out. We've been seeing those stories. And so anyway, the pandemic is more than just the virus.
Agreed. And I think, a lot of the side effects, a lot of the consequences from being shut down for as long as we have been,
that's what I mean.
Yeah, we won't know. We won't know for months and maybe years, right? The psychological toll that it took on a lot of people, not, to say anything of the economic toll, obviously, right? But a lot there, a lot to keep an eye on. Again, all the more reason why it is so critical, so important, to to just be good to each other, man, and try to reach out. And especially if you're in a position of privilege, and I'm not talking just wealth or money. I'm talking about, having a good relationship, having, a life that you find fulfilling. If you're fortunate enough, like I'm fortunate enough to enjoy that, that's a privilege. Try to spread that a little bit. Try to look out for people. It's I think it's the very least as humans that we could do, and we got to get better at it.
Yep.
Let's get into Joe Biden. Last week we talked about Mr. Rickett saying, your kids are gonna die if you let them smoke marijuana. You're gonna kill them. They're dead. They're out of here, right? And this week we find out that the Biden administration has suspended dozens of young White House staffers, or they've been asked to resign or placed in a remote work program due to past marijuana use.
Siberia?
Washington, Siberia, apparently. And so, the staffers, rightfully so, are pissed because initially the Biden administration, allegedly, according to the staffers, said that recreational use of cannabis would not be a disqualifying factor, according to 3 people familiar with the situation, according to this article. And so it affected staffers where marijuana is actually legal, which again, who in the fuck are you, Mr. Biden and chief of staff person, to decide what is moral and immoral if it's legal? And so I have a problem with this. I have a serious problem with this because where do we draw the line, right, Nick? I mean, is that third glass of wine the one that's going to get me disqualified as a staffer? Is it the third vodka soda? Is it is it the length of my shirt?
Is it your OnlyFans account?
Is it? I don't have an OnlyFans account, but if I did, would it be my OnlyFans account? Yeah, no. Again, not very encouraging, Uncle Joe. I think I don't think this is a good look for the administration. Obviously, there are much more serious issues on the agenda for 2021. But yeah, this is interesting to me in a sense because I want to see if it's the last of it or if this becomes a hallmark of the administration, being paranoid, being the moral police, and how that affects the quality of personnel that it's able to recruit, right?
Did the staffers say that they smoked marijuana or they were tested? How did that come about?
That part is not clear. What is clear is that many of the staffers that were asked to resign or suspended were asked if they had smoked marijuana in the past. And even that was enough for some of those staffers to be suspended or be asked to resign.
Interesting.
And so it's not even, in many cases, according to the staffers, it's not even current marijuana use that the administration didn't like. It's past marijuana use. And look, if you've been around DC or kind of know how it works, it's nothing but 20-year-olds that write all the bills and do all the legwork, right? And then you have literally an old figurehead that takes the credit for all of it and signs the law, signs the bill. It's how it works. And so, yeah, I can't imagine that this is a prudent move by the administration, especially, again, considering that in DC, marijuana is legal.
Well, and considering that he said it wasn't going to be a disqualifier, and considering that, it's widely expected, and he's intimated as much that, or at least, the Democratic leadership has said that they want to make the legalization a priority this year. And so it's definitely hypocritical, but just a couple of things on the cannabis market. You had the Security and Fair Enforcement Banking Act was reintroduced into the House of Representatives this week. That would allow banks to handle the money in states where cannabis is legal. And then you had the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America. You talked about how a bill becomes a law. Well, before the 20-year-olds write the law, the lobbyists tell them what's going to be written, and then they write the law, and then they give it to the gray hair to sign. And so the lobbyists, in this case, the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America, put out their guidance on how that laws should be written, right? They put out a press release. It said, principles of safe, smart, and responsible federal regulation of adult use cannabis. And so this is the obviously alcoholic beverage lobby, which is a big group saying, they're ready now for this to become legal because they've now got their pound of flesh, right? With AB InBev and Molson Coors and Constellation now having taken stakes in large cannabis companies. So they're not going to miss out. So now it's time to make it federally legal. And anyway, with all this stuff, with the recent elections, lots of states it went legal, medical or recreational in the past election. New Jersey just coming on here in recent months. Anyway, it's old hat, it's old hand, it's old wall, and it's hypocritical.
Hypocritical indeed. Coinbase and Reddit are going public, Nick.
They sure are. They sure are, Gerardo. And so, not sure what I wanted to talk about other than there's a lot of speculative assets out there, right? And well, let's take Coinbase first. You wanted to buy Bitcoin before, you had to buy Bitcoin, right? So you had to open up a wallet somewhere, probably Coinbase. Or you had to find some other way to buy a company that owned Bitcoin, because we've got no ETFs approved by the SEC yet, which I think will likely change soon. But there was no ETF to go out there and buy Bitcoin. And so you had to start buying that Mass Roots company, that MSTR, which had bought billions of dollars in Bitcoin, or you were looking at some OTC or Canadian listed miner, right? Or an iced tea company that changed themselves into a blockchain company, but that was a long time ago. And so now it's like all this stuff is coming full circle, right? So now next week, Coinbase is going to IPO 68. What was the number? 68 billion. No, is that right? I gotta look it up, Gerard.
No, it's 2021.
It's 68 billion. It's $68 billion valuation. Insanity. So, goodness gracious! And so now you can buy a Bitcoin at, like you said at the start of the show, $57,000, $60,000. You can get access to, right, like the brokerage or the exchange. This would be like owning BlackRock, right, for the rest of the market, or owning like Exxon for oil. Now you can just own like the thing where all the Bitcoins are. It's like picks and shovels, right? It's like owning Sprott for gold mining, for example. And so I think you're going to see a lot of fanfare around this in the next week. And the same thing with Reddit, right? Thinking back over the past couple of months, you have all these, the Redditors, the AMC, right? The GameStop, and then the Silver Squeeze, of course. But why, Gerardo, do we need Wall Street Bets to tell us what to buy? I mean, we can just IPO Reddit and we'll just own the whole fucking thing. And so here comes Reddit hiring its, first sort of chief financial officer. They haven't filed anything yet, but they're taking what would be the natural steps toward an IPO. And so I didn't really have an explicit point I wanted to make, but when I think about end games, and when I think about end of bubbles, and when I think about the snake eating its head, and when I think about, honestly, just, not allegories, but things that have symbolism, I think Coinbase going public and Reddit taking the steps to go public are, if nothing else, further indications of the bubble that we're currently in.
Bubbles can last a lot longer than Harry Dent can stay solvent.
Well, then anyone can stay solvent. That's the whole thing, right?
I think there's a lot of bubble left, Nick.
Yeah. And so, I think people will buy this Coinbase IPO. I think that we talked about it last week, $1,400 checks on the way if they haven't hit already. You got an extra month to pay your taxes now. Not likely that if you got a check, you're paying taxes anyway, but you know what I mean? There's a lot of leniency out there. There's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of froth out there. So I agree with you. And we had Jerome this week, who we don't even talk about anymore because we know what he's
because again,
say.
it's so predictable. It's not news. He's not thinking about raising rates or, pulling money. And again, it's not up to him. The market will force him to raise rates in due time. But yeah, we know exactly what's going to come out of his mouth every single time he speaks, right?
Exactly. And so, like you say, it could go on for longer. That's why I'm interested to see, like we started this podcast with, how the next couple of weeks shake up once the volume comes back.
Very, very, very interesting close to the month, I predict, Nick.
I would have to agree.
You want to tell us about the space telescope before we get on out of here?
Oh, God, I had a lot of topics this week. Yes, but I'll make it quick because I want to write about it.
You're earning your witty and insightful and world-famous moniker today, Nick.
You know the Hubble, of course. Well, we're getting a new one now. The Hubble is old news. We're getting the James Webb Space Telescope, right? And this thing is worth a cool $10 billion. And it's got gold, which is really what caught my eye about this story. It's got gold-coated mirrors, lots of them. That's why it's worth $10 billion. Gold's expensive.
A little bit.
And so they got to get this thing to, I believe it's South America. It's been a couple of days since I read the story. Yeah, French Guiana. And so... but it's like in the northern hemisphere now, and they got to get it to the southern hemisphere, but it's a $10 billion thing. And so they're worried about pirates.
Of course we are. Because it's 2021. And of course,
they're worried about seafaring pirates stealing the gold-coated mirrors and the $10 billion telescope. And so there is a super secret plan to lock down the Panama Canal to get this $10 billion telescope through. And anyway, I just thought that was super interesting. So hopefully pirates don't get our new space
Come on, pirates. Although, again, like you always say, the writers in 2021, they're not resting. They have been a busy bunch. And wow, it's only March, Nick. It's only March. Excited for your weekend?
I am getting excited. I got a little brunch date with my wife. And of course, it's the first day of spring. So everyone's looking forward to that.
Transformational times. Change is in the air. Vaccinations are being administered at record rates, record pace. And look, I think we're getting to a point where hopefully in the next couple of months, if you want a vaccine, you can have one. If you don't, you can choose not to. But I am really looking forward to the part of this story where everybody actually has a choice, right? And whatever choice you make, completely up to you. No shaming either way. But yeah, it's been a year in the making, and it feels like things are slowly turning, right?
I'll bless your choice.
I like it. I like it like Pope Francis.
Exactly.
I'll leave that there. That's all I got this week, Nick. Anything else?
Nope,
I love it. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody. I am Gerardo Del Real, along with Mr. Nick Hodge. This was episode 109 of Bizarro World. Go be kind to each other, guys and gals.
Don't steal any space telescopes. See ya.
Amen.